What's up, y'all? Welcome to my relatively new YouTube channel. In this video, I'll be sharing my LSD trip story, which ultimately was the breakthrough experience that led me to the life I currently live, and in a way is the reason I started this channel and started following the psychedelic path. I had a classic ego death, a Kundalini awakening, and an epiphany about evolution, humanity, and my own purpose in life. Before we really get into this, I think it's super important to address safety. At the time of this experience in 2011, a lot of what people were selling on the street as acid was actually this very little known and research chemical called 2,5-I-N-bomb, which is actually dangerous and, as far as I know, is the only psychedelic that has caused deaths. So please be careful with that and know your source. Please buy a testing kit. I'm gonna add a link to a video about how to test your acid. Real LSD is safe, odorless, and tasteless. So please buy a test kit, know your source, and remember, if it's bitter, it's a spitter. Also, please remember that set and setting are paramount, and if you properly address set and setting, you're almost guaranteeing that your trip will be a positive experience. This includes having a trip sitter like I did in my breakthrough experience. These are all keys. So I'll just preface this a little bit by talking about where I was leading up until this experience. So when I was about 17 or 18 years old, I started to smoke weed, and that really was life enriching for me because I'm a musician, and the very first experience I ever had with weed involved listening to music and playing music. And I need to make another video about that as well, but it led to a lot of new kind of appreciation of beauty in my life. So at that time, weed was the only real psychedelic that I had really experienced, and even saying that, it's a mild psychedelic, but it is psychedelic. So at that time, since that was the only thing I had my hands on, I just kept trying to see if I could get higher and higher and higher and really just push the limit, you know, like, let's see what happens when we pass around 3 blunts in a row, that kind of thing. And one of the reasons I was curious about that is because one of my good friends, Chris, who plays an important role in this story. So my friend Chris told me that he got really high with his brother and that he was seeing these beautiful patterns and geometric light. And that really got my interest piqued, because that was just the beginning of a lifelong fascination with hallucinations, psychedelic hallucinations. So I'm going to get into this trip experience, which without a doubt transformed my life. It totally changed everything for me. And I'm sure if you've had a powerful enough psychedelic experience, you can say the same thing. A lot of people rate mystical experiences as being in the top 1, 2, 3 experiences in their life. And this is absolutely number 1 for me. So far, everything else that has happened in my life, besides a few other psychedelic experiences, just pales in comparison to this. I'm still trying to integrate and understand what really happened to me on this day almost 10 years ago. So the very first time I took acid was probably that N-bomb stuff. I took 1 hit. I remember it being very bitter, and we were just at my friend's house. I just remember having a very cartoony visual field, and nothing too crazy happened. You know, we got stoned on top of it. We sat in the backyard, watched the sun come up. I remember the first time I took acid just laughing at money and looking at a $20 bill and just thinking how hilarious it was. And it was the first time that I looked at money as really an imaginary substance. It's something that we just decide is valuable, but if you strip all of that meaning and association away, you just look at this little piece of cloth, this little dollar bill, and you're like, really? Like, this is what we stress out about so much? And at the time, I found it hilarious. So since that was my first experience with acid, I obviously wanted to keep going. I was still curious about it. This was before I had really tripped on anything else. So before this experience, I only had done that one hit of N-bomb, and it was, it wasn't anything too crazy. It was kind of just dipping my toes in the water. All right, so the way this started was me and a friend hit up another friend, and they had some acid, which, as it turns out, it was real acid. I knew I wanted to take some more this time, so I got 2 hits, and then my friend Shane, he got 3. So we bought some acid from a friend. We got the acid. It was on a sugar cube, and I remember taking it and didn't taste a thing. So that's already good sign number 1. I don't remember what we did leading up to the come up. I think we were just sitting outside in the cul-de-sac. So I remember when I first started to feel it, things started to morph. This is a classic indicator of when your trip is starting. Things start to breathe and morph, and things start to seem strange, and you're brought into this present moment. You stop thinking so much about what I did yesterday, what I'm doing tomorrow. Your senses become sensitized, and you lock into the present moment. So a weird thing that I started to notice as my trip really started to kick in is that it almost seemed like there was like a light source, almost like we were inside of a giant police siren, and the light was just spinning around and around, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Has anybody ever felt that? It's really weird. As this come up starts to ramp up, I started feeling quite uncomfortable and nauseous. I was like, whoa, like things are getting real here. So as I continued to get uncomfortable and nauseous, I started to feel like I was kind of dying. Later, I would realize that this is part of the ego death experience, but at that time, I didn't know. I thought I was actually dying, which happens to a lot of people. So I'm sure there's others of you out there that can relate to the feeling of thinking you're dying on psychedelics. So as I was starting to get scared and feel like I was gonna die, I just had to sit down. And at this point, we were outside in the cul-de-sac, and I sit down, put my ass on the ground. So I was super scared and uncomfortable, but what really turned things around was when my friend Chris came over to my side, and this really felt like I was dying. So I just had the sense that here I am in my deathbed. Maybe I wasn't so sure that I was gonna die, but I felt like it at the time. So here comes my friend Chris, who has some experience, and he's our trip sitter for the day. And Shane, my friend, he's also going through it too at the same time, but I was pretty engrossed in what my trip was doing. So my friend Chris comes up to me, and he knows that I'm dying or feel like I'm dying, and I'm super uncomfortable. So what he does is, as I'm sitting on the ground, he takes my hand and holds my hand like a dear friend or like a brother would. If you were on your deathbed, it's the way that someone would hold your hand like they knew you were dying, but they're comforting you. So that ended up being what triggered the most beautiful and profound trip of my life. I think it was his act of generosity and kindness and compassion that launched me into the biggest breakthrough mystical experience of my life. As I'm coming up, and this act of compassion turned my trip around completely, the very first thing I started to see was these fountains of light. They were like arcs of white light, like a marble arch of white light going from point to point, just out here in the most boring suburban cul-de-sac that I've known forever. And all of a sudden, this beautiful fountain of light is just going everywhere. After seeing these white fountains of light, in between these arcs that I'm talking about, I began to see what I can only describe as neon green Christmas trees. They were slightly opaque, and what they looked like, I would say that they were about 3 or 4 feet tall, sort of see-through, 3-dimensional, neon green. They looked like a mixture of Sanskrit letters, Hebrew, Arabic, while also looking like geometric and mathematical. I'll do my best to try to animate this. Nothing can compare to the beauty and perfection of what I was gazing at. So this is the first time I've really hallucinated anything like that, and since then I've still had hallucinations, but really this is the most stunning and beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life, still to this day. When I was looking at this thing, I got the intuition that what I was looking at was the love glue of the universe. This is the cosmic love energy that holds our world together. You can think of it as the love of the earth being represented by gravity holding us down, the magnetosphere that protects us from the solar rays, the cosmic radiation that could kill us all, fry us in an instant. In a way, all of these energies are the earth protecting and loving us. Even expanding beyond that scale, I think that this energy pervades the entirety of the fabric of our universe. At least that's what it felt like at the time. At this point, things are incredibly psychedelic and visual. My friend Chris, who I'll remind you was totally sober during this, starts acting in the strangest shamanic way. It seemed like something possessed him, and he started acting in this very flowing and mysterious way, like something took over him, but he knew exactly what to say, he knew exactly what to do, and I knew that he had experienced tripping, so he probably did know what kind of state of mind we were in, but to me at the time, it seemed like he was just on some kind of frequency, like he was the chosen guide for that experience. Things just took on an incredible, rich meaning. Everything he did, all his little gestures and words, everything just seemed so like it was meant to be. One of the first things that he did that was this trippy shamanic thing, where he took like a branch that had dead rose leaves on it and he started shaking it. And he was shaking it around me, and I just saw all these rose petals fluttering to the ground. And I was starting to have some pretty intense visuals right before this, so everything looked much more fractal, and all the randomness of the petals landing on the ground had this kind of order and beauty and intricacy. Just the way they were oriented and the patterns of them was so intentional and artistic. Meanwhile, all of this is going on in my head, and my friend Shane, he actually took 3 hits of acid, so he's going even deeper into this shit, man. So the next thing we did was get into the car, which at that time in our life, that was our ultimate hangout spot. We were smoking weed in the car, jamming to albums. It was a good time. And so we were just doing what we typically did at that point. So we get in the car, we started smoking some weed, we put on some Tame Impala, and things got even more intense. When we were listening to Expectation by Tame Impala, I feel like I could feel the energy of the earth rising up. And it's so hard to explain, but I really felt like I could feel the vibration of mud and earth and just that earthy rootedness. I could feel that energy rising up from the ground and from the music itself. I started to get a sensation of these earth tones like mud and just dirt and clay and all of these things, and I was starting to feel very earthy myself. While all these earthly tones are going on, I also had very cosmic vibes at the same time, and I could feel my consciousness begin to expand. So at this point in the trip, I started to feel this fire forming in my belly, and it got more and more intense, and I just felt this fire growing and growing, and it was right here. So this fire gets so intense and so euphoric that it starts rising up to the heart as if it has nowhere else to go, and I start feeling this immense love and euphoria, and I start feeling it in my heart. So then this energy is now sitting up here in my heart area, and it starts to get so intense and overwhelming that I feel like it has nowhere else to go now too. And so it starts pushing up and up. Once it gets there, I feel the energy in my throat, and I feel like all this love energy that I'm feeling right now is just so great and so intense that I have no choice but to express it. And that was symbolized by the energy being right here in the throat, where you speak it into existence, or in my case, play guitar and other forms of creativity. Whenever I had the energy up here, that's when things just really went cosmic. It pushed up all the way out through the top of my head, and I don't know what to say besides I went full galaxy brain. When people talk about cosmic consciousness, that is a real thing, and that is what I experienced at that time. Before that, I had never heard of anything like that. So to me, this was just this crazy, like, mind-shattering moment. I identified with the cosmos as a whole, and I really felt like me no longer existed, and I felt myself as continuous with this huge galactic scale of both space and time. Including this physical vastness, I also felt myself as a continuum, as part of history and deep time. I could feel the turning of the giant planet, and how every moment was just this turning of the earth, and every new moment we were just continuing to ride this giant spaceship of a planet. I felt the millions of years that led directly to this moment. My thoughts are racing extremely fast. I feel like I'm having 1,000 epiphanies per second, and I feel like everything makes sense. Because I'm having so many epiphanies, I feel like I need to write this down, because I'm not sure if I'm going to remember what I was realizing the next day. So I grab a piece of paper and I start to write things down. When I started writing them down, the words were just flying off the paper. Like, they were actually like flying towards my face. And that actually gave me a sense that I was writing in 3D. So I actually thought that I could just write over the same place, and that it was just gonna add to this 3D layer that I was writing, which when you look at the paper the next day, I was just scribbling on top of what I already wrote. But in this state of mind, I thought that I could write in 3D, basically. And I also thought I could write in fractals, because I would write the first part of the sentence, and then I would put the 3 different words that the sentence could end with, and just branch them off into little trees. So I actually only had 1 piece of paper, so we needed to go get some more. But we didn't have any, so we did probably one of the dumbest things you could do on acid, which is go to Walmart. So luckily for us, we had our trip sitter, and Chris was able to drive us up to Walmart. And like I said, he was being super possessed, like he knew exactly what to say and what to do. So he took us to Walmart in an instant. When we got to Walmart, I actually went to the bathroom first and looked at myself in the mirror, which you get mixed reports on whether or not that's a good thing to do. But I noticed that if your trip is already going very well and you're feeling very euphoric and good, that looking in the mirror is not that bad. Actually, it was pretty nice. There's this weird alienness to the way that you see yourself in the mirror, but also a familiarity. So I'm looking at myself in the mirror, I'm feeling super euphoric, loving myself, all that good stuff. So we leave the bathroom and we go on our search to find some paper so I can write down all these wonderful epiphanies that I'm having. And if anyone has been tripping this hard, you know it's super hard to talk to somebody, especially if they are not tripping or don't know what that even is. So we were looking for this paper, right? And Chris goes up to the employee and he asks them in the weirdest possible way, which at the time was hilarious. He was speaking super abstractly and he was like, "I need your trees. Can you tell me where I can find your trees?" He was talking about paper, but it took the poor employee like 2 minutes to actually figure out what he was talking about. And she's like, "Oh, paper? Yeah, okay, right over here." And just ignored the fact that we were a bunch of weirdos who, if you ask me, it was probably pretty obvious that we were on some kind of drug, but they probably had no idea. So we get back to the cul-de-sac, and once we get back home, we head up to our storage room where we have band practice. And this is something that at that time we were doing every day. We were writing our album called Tesseract. The band is Sunrise and Ammunition. Just quick little shout out there. We were playing music every day at this point, so as per our routine, we just went up to the storage room and started having a jam. So this was the very first time I've ever jammed on psychedelics, and it was wild. The first thing that I noticed when I started playing guitar was just looking at it. I was looking at the guitar neck and just saw all the frets, the 6 strings, and I was looking at this fretboard as if it were truly infinite. I know that there's always an unlimited amount of creative options when you're playing on the guitar, but I was experiencing that in a very visceral way. Just looking at it and thinking, wow, this thing really is infinite. So I turn on my amp and I start experimenting with the feedback. So I was just holding my guitar really close up to the amp so it creates that oscillation and that kind of high-pitched squealing sound. But if you have a nice amp and guitar, it's not a horrible sound. It can actually be pretty nice. So I was playing with feedback on the guitar and just experiencing it in this extremely visceral way. And when I was playing with the feedback, I had an epiphany about Jimi Hendrix. I felt like I really tuned in to what Jimi Hendrix's energy was all about. And I had been a fan of his since I was 12 years old and playing guitar, but psychedelic drugs had nothing to do with it. So I feel like it finally unlocked one of the components of Jimi Hendrix's essence that I couldn't have known until then. So we were jamming, and I don't even remember what we played, but I remember it being a lot of fun and feeling extremely primal. One of the things that I was realizing about Jimi Hendrix was that his destructive energy was actually just clearing the way for creative energy. It was like this Ouroboros of creation and destruction that led to new things. So this was the first time that I had really thought of destruction as creation. It was this really profound moment happening in the middle of the jam session. While we were also jamming, I was noticing that looking at my hands, I was like, dude, these are monkey hands. These hands started to really remind me of primates. You know, I believe in evolution, and I generally think that we are an advanced species of apes, basically. But this was the first time that I really experienced it. It's one thing to know something intellectually, but it's a totally separate thing to really experience it like that. So I was playing the guitar with my monkey hands, thinking about how these evolved to swing on the branches of trees. And here I am playing my guitar, swinging around this wooden neck on the guitar, just like a monkey would be swinging around on the trees. And it was just this profound kind of full circle moment where I realized that it's only slightly different from a monkey swinging around on the trees. It's still got that playful primate thing going on, but just a little more advanced. So at this point, we're probably at like hour 5 or 6 of the trip. So this is where things plateau, but you're definitely still tripping. At this point, you know, we're still totally wired. The sun's starting to come up. And I remember that we were outside and you could hear the world waking up. We had just had this incredible journey and we were still in the middle of it, but you could hear the school buses starting to take off. You could hear the sound of the birds chirping. You could hear the world waking up. And it was this really beautiful natural cycle that we were tuning into. So we walked to the park that's nearby in the neighborhood, and I was still really riding this wave of thinking about evolution and feeling like a monkey. Like, I really must emphasize that this is the very first time that I truly felt like an ape, like some kind of cosmic euphoric ape. And I was still just thinking about the trees and primates and how we've co-evolved. And I was touching the trees and my hands were covered in the earth, and it just had this very ancient feeling to it. That is the gist of the trip. After that, we went to a donut shop, ate some kolaches at like 8 in the morning, and then went home and went to sleep. Following the trip, I would later read and discover more about that experience I had during the peak, which I would now call a Kundalini awakening. Now, what's interesting about that is I had never read or heard anything about Kundalini or chakras up until that point, which leads me to believe that this is genuinely something that is wired into us. I had no expectations or beliefs about this stuff. I'd never heard of it at all. So it's truly incredible to me that I had this full-blown experience of a serpent energy rising through my spine, which I forgot to mention that earlier in my story. When this energy finally got all the way up here, I felt this kind of energy going up my spine, like very serpent-like. So I understand why they call Kundalini the coiled serpent energy, because when it wakes up, it's like, I wholeheartedly believe that Kundalini is real. Now, I realize that a lot of New Agers sound super silly when they talk about Kundalini and the chakras with the utmost authority. So I'm always skeptical when I hear other people talk about it, but I have to say it's been verified in my own personal experience. And since then, I've been practicing Kundalini meditation, a little bit of Kundalini yoga. And when I work with these energies, profound things happen and I get visions and insights and euphoria. So I'm absolutely on that path, and this is what triggered that for me. I also forgot to mention earlier, when the energy rose up through my throat, that was the point where I realized that my mission on this earth is to create. It is to make music and to be creative, to get this feeling, whatever this is that's bubbling up in my heart, to get it out is my soul's purpose on this life. So that was one of the things that I gained from this experience, is a purpose in life. And I already knew that I love to play music and to play guitar and be creative, but this just cemented it in a profound existential way that wouldn't have happened without the experience. So I felt completely reborn after this experience. All of my senses were refined and refreshed. And I feel like I was looking at things like a newborn. And this is something that you hear other people talk about whenever they have psychedelic experiences, or if you talk about like someone like Eckhart Tolle, whenever they reach their enlightenment. This is what they talk about. Everything looks new and alive, and nothing is the same anymore. And part of that was scary because my old sense of self did die, and I had to patch it together over time. I went through this whole process of coming back down to earth. My ego was destroyed, but then it was also inflated after this because I thought I had unlocked some secret of the universe, which I think I may have glimpsed it, but I didn't really become enlightened. But I think the word that I would describe what happened to me after would be Satori, which is kind of like a temporary form of enlightenment. So I would definitely classify the feeling I had for the next few months as Satori. I felt deeply connected and living in the eternal moment. I also verified the experience of the chakras whenever I saw an Alex Grey painting that depicts this energy. This was the first time that I thought, oh, maybe I'm not actually crazy, because Google searches didn't pull up a whole lot of things about Kundalini or chakras in 2011. Now you can find a lot more information, but back then I was just thinking I might actually just be crazy for what happened to me. So yeah, this video ended up being a lot longer than I expected, but a lot happened, and acid lasts for 12 hours. So this is still kind of a compact version of all of that. So thanks if you made it through the whole story. I really appreciate it. Please subscribe to my channel. I'm going to be doing more trip reports and things like this. These first 2 trip reports that I did are just kind of my biggest experiences, but I've had several little ones that are all pretty interesting. So I'm going to keep doing this. I'm having a lot of fun making videos and telling stories and improving my craft. This will probably not be the last time that I tell this story, but this is my first time giving it a shot on camera. All right, yeah, I think that's gonna do it. Thank you guys so much, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and help me get this channel off the ground. At this point, I don't have too many people adding things in the comments, so if you have any crazy stories of your own, please type them in the comments. I read them all, and I'll respond to them. So please stay in touch and reach out. All right. Peace.